present something new because I've been talking about coffee and for you guys for the last 2 years, and I thought that the best thing to approach this time would be to talk about the new stuff in coffee. And actually, I'm also kind of going towards this direction also. And I can see from previous presentation here that almost everybody somehow has some sort of research that is looking to genes effects and what is the makeup, the genomic makeup of each one of us with interaction with what we have, our environment, the drugs we get, and all that. So, and coffee, believe me or not, is not an exemption. And I start off actually looking at a very simple idea. Because that was back in time, I saw people, oh, I cannot drink coffee, I have problems, or I cannot have caffeine, I have problems with caffeine, and then I have the decaf or whatever. And I was always thinking, you know, it's not a big group that comes with this kind of a complaint, of course, because we know that coffee is the most drink beverage first thing in the day for the whole world population. So, of course, it's not a common sense, let's say, on a population, but definitely there is a particular group of the population that does have problem drinking coffee. So I was thinking, how come to explain that, you know, the majority have no problem, and then there is this part of this group that does have a problem. So sort of like the problem Dr. iPad, I like that. Dr. Iman said yesterday, you know, something we have to look into the problem, what's going on. So I thought, you know, if those people mainly have problems with the caffeine effects, which is tachycardia, a little bit of headache sometimes and things like that, maybe, just maybe, those people have some sort of a different makeup to deal with caffeine. And we also have another presentation yesterday that showed the levels of caffeine under the metabolization of CYP1A2. Caffeine actually is very interesting because 95% of the metabolism of caffeine is done by CYP1A2. So I thought to myself, maybe we should look into the CYP1A2 genotype of those people, because we do know there are polymorphisms associated with CYP1A2 and many other cytochrome P450 enzymes. And guess what? I did a small mini trial with my own students. It was a lot of fun. I just get random students that wanted to come. I gave them a good breakfast, but of course, before this good breakfast, they draw a sample blood. Then they have all 1 cup of coffee that I brew in my lab, and that I knew exactly the constitution, the composition of the coffee and all that. And then 45 to 60 minutes after, which is the peak of caffeine in the blood level, I took another blood sample of those students. And I did a lot of things with this blood. I'm still doing some work with it because I managed also to get the DNA from the blood, from the cells. But basically, with the caffeine thing, I concluded what was obvious. I mean, if you have a genotype of a slow metabolizer of caffeine, then you're going to build up more caffeine in your system, and consequently, you're more likely to have problems with caffeine in the coffee. Especially if you're drinking a dark coffee. And I'm going to leave this word, this sentence here. We're going to go back to this matter later in our talk. All right, so basically, this generic approach, like I said, you can do just like I did, but there is actually a group now that created a consortium. You see, so interesting is about coffee consumption because like you see, for instance, coffee is a very complex mixture of substances. I mean, we can imagine how many compounds you can isolate from coffee. If you run a LCMS, that I was interested in get that method from that student, you run a LCMS on a coffee, and you're going to get tons of compounds. Okay, so I'm looking to all of them? No. I'm looking to a specific group that has been showing a bunch of studies, not only in animals, but epidemiological studies, showing effects in human health. So I'm interested in this group of drugs, which happen to be the chlorogenic acids, which are polyphenols that has been advertised for a long time in terms of antioxidant properties. But it's not only antioxidant properties that they have. They have much more than that. Okay, and the coffee that we drink, which is a black box, because we don't know what we're drinking. Have you thought about that? No, you don't know. The origin of the beans, you don't know. Of course, unless you're a gourmet person that buys your coffee just from Colombia or just from, Puerto Rico or Guatemala, but even if it's not so, and most of us aren't, I believe, so we don't know. And of course, we're not going to know also the roasting process that those beans were submitted to and what is the percentage of the mix. Okay, so coffee has those two main components that I'm going to focus on my talk, which is going to be caffeine. Caffeine, of course, has been studied for many, many years. We know a lot about caffeine. We are more interested in the polycyclic phenols, which are the chlorogenic acids. Various properties have been attributed to those compounds. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Some effects are opposite and leads to controversial conclusions. If you go to do a little search on any topic that you cross with the word coffee, let's say coffee and cardiovascular disease, coffee and colon cancer, coffee, you're going to find papers that says it's good. You're going to find papers that is not. And that keep bringing to people that have restrictions with coffee to continue having those restrictions. And I feel like I have to educate the population, especially the American population, because the American population is the #1 consumer of coffee in the world. And I am American, but I'm also Brazilian, and I belong to a country which is a #1 producer of coffee. So we have to come with an agreement here, right? Okay, so there are compounds in coffee, for instance, caffeine, that sometimes play against other compounds that do good. So let's say caffeine is increasing the blood pressure, but there are components in coffee that have been researched in animals showing that actually reduce the blood pressure. So what is the final result? We don't know. We don't know the coffee you're drinking. I'm going to keep repeating this for long. All right, so a new approach is to look into possible effects of drugs through genetic and genomic studies. So what I'm saying is that maybe it's easier to look at our genome, how we respond to coffee, and see what we have different between us. Maybe that would be, and that is already giving a lot of leads in terms of looking at those effects of coffee. All right, so actually was formed like 2 years ago, if I'm not wrong. Actually was when just I was about to publish the CYP1A2 paper, and I saw that, oh my God, the people are so ahead of me. I'm looking at CYP1A2, they are looking to the whole genome. But of course, this is a consortium, is composed from researchers from all over the globe, Europe, Japan, Asia, of course, here in America, Brazil. So there are people from all over the globe, because genome is something really, just like they had to gather all of them to discover the genome and be able to tell how our DNA is composed. We need to have a bunch of labs doing that. Same thing here. So the purpose of this consortium is to identify DNA lossy associated with habitual coffee consumption. So they are doing that. And they found already a bunch of them. Some of them we knew already, like, for instance, the lossy that has CYP1A2 and CYP1A3. But there are some new ones also that have been identified. And now it's just like everything else. Now they are trying to see what is the relationship of those lossy with the components in coffee and how to explain the effect. So I'm going to give as an example, because there are so many studies, with coffee, just like I said. You can look into genomic approach to colon cancer in coffee, cardiovascular diseases in coffee, depression in coffee, alcoholism in coffee. So other neurodegenerative diseases, such like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. So I need to give you an example. I want to focus on one disorder. And lately I've been very interested in looking at the effects of coffee and obesity. Maybe because I struggled with obesity all my life, and I drink coffee all my life. So please tell me what I'm doing wrong, right? But anyway, coffee consumption and obesity, I will use an example to show how different groups all over the world have been studying effects of possible components in coffee that are related with those effects in human health. So, for instance, there is this study on diabetic rats that show that those chlorogenic acids, and maybe I should make a pause here and go back to my presentation of last year, because many of you were not here, and I would like to show some things about obesity and coffee that I presented last year. Oh my God, this is not my presentation. All right. Yeah, it's this one here. Okay, so for instance, coffee chemistry. I've been talking about polyphenols. What kind of polyphenols, how they look like. We might have some chemistry people that like to see some structures, right? So I'm showing some of them, and as you can see here, this is what a chlorogenic acid looks like. It's the mix of quinic acid with another portion that turns that into a caffeine ferrolide, a caffeine quinite, as we call that in general, caffeoyl quinite acids. Okay. So, and what happens with this structure that we see here after they do this, transform into caffeoyl quinic acids, which I call CGAs. The interesting thing is that coffee is one of the few natural products that after being burned gets better. Okay? That's one very interesting thing, because if not, we should be having all green coffee instead of roast coffee. Right? Why we get roast coffee instead of green coffee? Well, first of all, is more the flavor is much better, of course. The aroma is delicious when you're brewing, but those components, what happened with them when you burn the coffee, they are around 7 to 9% in the seeds in the coffee beans, in the green coffee beans. But when you burn the coffee, then you roast, they actually are transformed into quinolactones, meaning that there is a loss of a molecule of water, a dehydration due to the heat, and they transform into lactones. And guess what? The lactones are as good as the precursors, the CGAs. So whatever have left of CGAs plus the quinolactones that are generated during the roasting process gives you a very good balanced number of components that are responsible for those health effects that we are mentioning. And right here, I'm just focusing on diabetes. So there are some, for instance, interesting facts, and the reason why I selected to talk about diabetes here, especially here in the U.S., has been a very alarming situation we have around 5.1 million deaths in 2013 due to diabetes. We have around 80% of the people with diabetes live in the low or middle income countries. So that's a problem. I mean, Brazil is seeing that. I believe India is probably also seeing that. And of course, we're seeing this here in the United States also. The spending with diabetes accounts for 10.8% of the total health expenditure. So it's a lot of money being spent with treating diabetes. And of course, it's the fourth and fifth leading cause of death in most of the light income countries. So, I mean, it's a really big problem for the United States right now. And what I want to say to Americans is like, don't be afraid, for instance, of giving coffee to your children. I mean, children in Brazil drink coffee. I drank coffee when I was small, and I'm here, okay? I didn't die. Okay, was not a straight coffee, was not a shot of coffee, nothing like that. Was coffee with milk, but had coffee in it. And there are, for instance, I'm going to show you actually, our other presentation will be on a survey that we made, and there were part of the population that was not adults, were actually adolescents. And we could see clearly how that ameliorates the attention, the memory, especially when you drink in the morning and you go for school, you know, and that association. Okay, so another slide that I want to highlight here in this diabetes thing. Okay, I think that was, yeah, I wanted to show the chemistry. I'm going to be talking about later. This is showing here the reaction I told you, where the molecule of water is lost in the caffeoyl quinic acid. Here's where the molecule of water is lost, transforming to lactones or quinides. And those are also healthy components in coffee. All right, let me go back to my presentation. So now that I have gave you some good arguments why we should, you know, care about coffee and diabetes, let's go back in here. All right. So, so the first, of course, in name of my country, the first group that I'm showing here comes exactly from Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. They did this research and they found out that diabetic rats, when they give in the diet of those mice, those rats, chlorogenic acids, caffeine, or coffee, they did those different groups of rats, and they found a decrease in the sodium-potassium ATPase activity, and also an increase in acetylcholinesterase enzyme. So those are things that now are there for us to explain what is the relationship of this decrease and this increase in terms of making those rats less likely to turn diabetics when they are fed by coffee and chlorogenic acids. Another study, this is coming from Italy, Padova, Italy, a group in Italy. They're looking at longevity genes, and this will be those two genes specifically, silent information regulator 2 and sirtuin 1. They observe that those genes are highly expressed in endothelial dysfunction. So this expression, highly expressed, is the way we look at when we are doing a genome-wide search. So we are searching for a group of genes that are expressed in higher concentration, not concentration, another word, in higher amounts, broader, in a specific population. So they are, of course, comparing people who drink coffee with people who doesn't drink coffee, and they are looking the genome of those two groups. And they found, looking at the population in general, that those two genes that are related to longevity are highly expressed in this endothelial dysfunction. And we know that the endothelial dysfunction is also related with oxidative stress, vascular senescence, which all leads to, of course, aging, right? So they found out that this SIRT1 regulates the expression of this redox enzyme that is linked to apoptosis, meaning the death of the cells. So you don't want the cells to die. You want the cells to keep alive, so you keep young and beautiful. So the process of aging and endothelial dysfunction is now a new target to look into, for instance, effects of coffee in those two specific genes. Maybe coffee has some effect on those. So I'm trying to show you how the genomic approach is leading to finding new avenues and new targets to explain effects and to understand better the disorders, of course. Okay, another study, and this was done actually also with coffee. They show that coffee consumption increases adiponectin levels. Okay, so adiponectin, it decreases, is associated with obesity. So you want to have high levels of adiponectin to be away from obesity. And what they found, coffee consumption increases adiponectin levels. So I'm showing you one of the mechanisms how coffee helps with obesity. There are many others. I just, like I said, selecting a couple of them to show you. And this is all research done. Adiponectin is secreted by adipocytes and belongs to a group named adipokines that has been now sort of a new venue that they've been looking, the people who study diabetes. They are more looking to those adipokines. And just showing that there is where it is located, and this gene has SNPs. SNPs is what we call single nucleotide polymorphism. And what single nucleotide polymorphism means is that a part of the population might have what we call the wild type, which is the type that most of us have, and some of us might have a mutant type, and that will be the gene that has the polymorphism. Okay? And this is a group from Tel Aviv, Israel. Okay, now another target for investigation, they are looking into coffee. They found out that coffee mitigated inflammation and obesity-induced insulin resistance in the skeletal muscle of high-fat diet-induced obese mice. So what they did, they induced obesity in the mice, and they fed those mice with coffee. And they observed, of course, they have to kill those animals after some time, and look at how was the inflammatory process in the muscle and in the liver. And they found that in the skeletal muscle, there was a reduction in this induced, that we know is the main characteristics of diabetes, the development of diabetes, is to find insulin resistance. So if you don't have insulin resistance, you cannot tell you are diabetic. Just having low levels of glucose doesn't mean that you are diabetic. You might be pre-diabetic. So this is another target for investigation, and that is a paper from Tokyo, Japan. So what I want to show here is that those genetic and genomic studies, they are the future of, I can tell you that, they are the future of understanding better what's going on with us and our health and how to treat us. And that was a good example yesterday, Dr. Aman showing the importance of associating the pharmacogenetic approach to the PK/PD model. So you can only look at, what is promoting the disease and the response of our body. You also have to look at the makeup of each one of us. Of course, much more complicated than we thought. And this group, for instance, was looking at decaffeinated green coffee attenuates diet-induced obesity and insulin resistance in mice. So they found out that coffee actually downregulates the genes involved with adipogenesis and inflammation in the visceral adipose tissue. And if you know, is only considered obesity when you have an increase of fat in your visceral adipose tissue. I mean, if you have a regular increase in fat in the whole body beneath your subcutaneous tissue, that's considered normal, putting weight normal. It's not a disease, let's say. But when you start to accumulate in here, right, or in here, then is obesity. Okay, and they found that coffee regulates those genes. So, and as you can see also, and I'm going to go back into that later in other talks, there's a lot of studies in mice, in rats. There's a lot of epidemiological studies, but not much PK/PD studies with those components. And that's the part I want to come in with. Okay. And this, by the way, is a study in Seoul, Korea. Okay, so I just to have an idea. So in conclusion, what I wanted to open up this morning was to say that genetic and genomic studies comparing populations that drink coffee regularly with non-coffee drinkers are leading to new findings in terms of genes that are involved in the physiopathology of important diseases such as diabetes. And that those genes, in parentheses, proteins, because of course when we talk about DNA, we are interested in the coding part of the DNA that leads to translation into a protein, right? So the protein that comes from those genes are new targets for the treatment of diseases, at the same time helping to elucidate intricate network of effects and the multitude of bioactive components on human health. Okay, now I want to, and I'll be doing this again, you're going to see this slide 3 times today, but I was talking to friends earlier today. I'm very sad to say that my mentor passed this year. His name is here, Darcy Roberto Lima. He was a physician, a clinical pharmacologist. He had his PhD from London, a hospital in London. He was a clinical pharmacologist that I met back in 1980-something. And he was the one who started studying natural products back in Brazil. I did some studies with him and his group. And then when I came to the United States to do my PhD, I joined the group back, and I embraced the coffee research as my own. And since then, he's been my mentor and a big link between, big groups and all that. Unfortunately, he passed this year. So I'm going to open for questions.
Any questions? Yes.
As usual, it's very good. But you said help with diabetes in your speech. Is it protection or help?
Is prevention.
It's prevention.
I would say prevention.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, is prevention. So if you have the diabetes type 2 and you say, I have diabetes, going to start taking coffee. Not saying not going to help. Yeah, it's going to help because you see all those effects going to be there. But you already have the disease, so you definitely need some drugs to do that. Probably if you are just diagnosed with diabetes, maybe if you just do, exercise and drink a lot of coffee before exercise, because coffee before exercise increases endurance and resistance to exercise. So you feel better. If you run like 2 miles, you're going to run maybe 4 miles if you have a cup of coffee. I don't have this data, but I do know that groups of athletes in Brazil, soccer is a big thing for us in Brazil, and the soccer team was actually in Institute of the Heart in São Paulo, which is a very prestigious institution in Brazil, and they did all the monitoring those athletes and gave them coffee before and after exercise, and they really saw that there is an increase, definitely, and that's more than proved, and that's a caffeine effect. Yes?
When you speak, when you're speaking about athletes, there's always always a discussion about doping. So what about coffee? I remember for 2 years ago there was a Norwegian. She was cycling and among the best in the world, and she was judged because she was drinking a lot of coffee. Mm-hmm. And my question to you: what do you think about that? Is that a dope or not?
Okay, is it coffee or bull something? Because there are those caffeine shots. Sorry, beverage drinks. Those I really can't tell because they have a very high concentration of caffeine. And of course, caffeine has, just like the parents, theophylline and theobromine, they're all xanthines, they do have a sequence of effects as you increase the dose. So, gotta see what kind of coffee she was taking, and how often. Because, the way we drink coffee, because first of all, it's too hot to have one zip, right? So, and caffeine, for example, is very fast metabolized. Yeah. So she probably, I don't know, maybe she's a slow metabolizer. I can't tell.
No, I don't know, but it was a huge discussion. But the point is that this coffee is taken away from the list now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I hear you, maybe it shouldn't be.
I understand your question, but I come back to the problem. We don't know which coffee. So we blame coffee, and coffee is a black box, coffee, like it was the same thing, like a milk that you take from the cow, right? No, it's not that. It's made of seeds and different seeds, different... Okay, so question.
Just a comment. Caffeine is not on the doping list anymore.
It's not on the doping list? Okay, so... Okay. I actually just, I'm about to publish a chapter on a book that I was requested, and I was very happy to do that because I didn't know much about it when I was requested, to write about effects of caffeine from the fetus and the pregnant woman all the way up to adolescence. Because, here in the United States, we are really looking at effects of coffee in adults. But very little is talked about the effects on children and, fetus and things like that. So I did a very thorough research in the last 10 years on papers on this matter. And I was very happy to conclude that coffee is not, there's nothing proving that coffee is bad for the woman that is lactant, that is giving milk to the child. It's not bad for the woman that is pregnant, although the Gynecologist Association of the United States it restricts to 300 milligrams per day of caffeine for a pregnant woman. But I can tell you that because I went through all the paper, all the bibliography, all the literature. Yes, there are some controversies, but again, studies that were not looking to the composition of coffee. So it's hard to tell if it's really the components that I'm saying they are healthy, or if there is some excess of some other components that we don't know yet. Any other comment or question?
Any questions? Yes. We have two more.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would just like to ask, with the studies you presented, was there a certain dose, daily dose, for the coffee being
Daily
consumed?
dose. Okay, good. Well, our dose is cups, right? So I would say all the studies that shows healthy benefits for coffee talks about between 2 and 4 cups per day.
Okay, so it seems that you cannot achieve these effects if it's just 1 cup a day. It has to be 2 and above.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? Okay, if not, Doctor, I have one more question. If even I observed the young generations, which we are nowadays, consumption of alcohol, then after 5 to 10 minutes within the consumption of coffee. As a pharmacist, yes, I know about the CNS stimulant and depressants, but as a common man, it's right the way they are consuming that both the things within this short durations.
Yes, sorry. I was trying to get ready for the next.
Okay, let it. Even nowadays, I am observing with the young generations, okay, they are consuming alcohol. Even the meanwhile, within a 5 minutes or 10 minutes, they are taking again coffee. As a pharmacist, yes, I observe something with the food interactions or whatever it may be, stimulant and depressions should not be at that. But as a common man, it's right what they are consuming that alcohol. This because it's observed yesterday, 2 days before, my neighbor, he consumed the wine, but after 5 minutes, he's routinely started with his coffee consumptions. That's the thing. If there is any major side effects which we are together with taking along with alcohol.
You mean effects of coffee and alcohol?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I was at some point trying to find a connection with the AA group, the Alcoholic Anonymous, because we do have a lot of evidence showing that if you substitute coffee for alcohol, you can get away from the habit. Yes, yes. Because why? I can tell you why. Because coffee, and was shown long time ago by Vanderbilt University here in the United States. They do have an institute for coffee studies, which actually was founded by my mentor and Peter Martin in Vanderbilt University. And they did studies, and they actually proved that those chlorogenic acids is a specific one that I can remember exactly what caffeoyl quinic is, but it's one of those caffeoyl quinic acids. They can bind to the same receptor that the opiates binds in the central nervous system. And they can activate the reward circuit that we have. So they can replace, any drug addiction such as alcohol. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Right.
Any more questions? Yes, you are ending the sessions.
Thank you.